We meet exactly 943 days since the Putin regime unleashed its expanded onslaught of human misery in Ukraine. That's 943 times, 943 chances that we could have done more to stop Russia's overt kinetic strikes against Ukrainian energy systems. Russia's campaign against Ukraine's civil energy infrastructure epitomizes the Kremlin's long-standing weaponization of energy, the hallmarks of which have included security of supply threats, monopolistic practices, disinformation, and the corruption and capture of elites. We must urgently do everything possible to support Ukraine's air defense and long-range strike capability before this winter so that the Kremlin is unable to further expand the humanitarian nightmare that it has caused across Ukraine. But while pursuing its hot war in Ukraine, another war is being waged by Putin's Kremlin, a shadow war in which it is targeting energy and critical infrastructure through sabotage on NATO soil with impacts across land, sea, and space domains. The unprecedented scale and scope of this ongoing sabotage spree by Russian-attributed and Russia-suspected actors is being undertaken to create panic and undermine support for Ukrainian victory across the West every day. Congress needs to use today's hearing as a starting point to support actions that make it clear to the Kremlin that its sabotage campaign to intimidate democracy ends here. My name is Dr. Benjamin L. Schmitt, and I've previously served as European Energy Security Advisor at the U.S. Department of State. I'm now a senior fellow at the University of Pennsylvania with appointments in both the Department of Physics and Astronomy and the Kleinman Center for Energy Policy, where I conduct physics and energy security research and teach graduate coursework on energy geopolitics and national security. For the past 18 months, I have led a Penn research project focused on analyzing how the Russian Federation now brazenly conducts clandestine physical sabotage attacks against energy and critical infrastructure across the NATO alliance. This work includes studying policies, technologies, and open source intelligence methods, including maritime automatic identification system data and commercial geospatial imagery data that can be developed and used to counter Kremlin hybrid warfare tactics. I've also conducted a field research expedition that is continental in scope, meeting with experts and officials and visiting critical infrastructure facilities across Europe, including those that have experienced physical sabotage incidents and those that want to prevent it from happening in the future. 4 such stops have become central case studies to my research. They provide key examples of the multispectral challenges that exist with infrastructure monitoring, protection, and attribution. For example, these stops have included, number 1, I traveled to the Norwegian island of Svalbard, just 400 miles from the North Pole, where on January 7th, 2022, a Russian fishing trawler was likely responsible for severing a vital subsea fiber optic cable transmitting commercial satellite data from the Svalsat ground station to the European mainland. That commercial data would prove vital in Ukraine's defense just weeks later. This incident also highlights growing Kremlin maritime doctrine to utilize so-called commercial or research vessels for espionage and sabotage in the European offshore. Number 2, I crisscrossed the Gulf of Finland and visited sites on both ends of the Baltic Connector natural gas pipeline that links Finland and Estonia. There, in early October 2023, a Chinese-flagged vessel with Russian ownership, escorted by a Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker, dragged an anchor for hundreds of kilometers, severing telecommunications cables and destroying the Baltic Connector pipeline itself. Number 3, just a few weeks ago, earlier this month, I chartered a vessel from Denmark's island of Bornholm for an expedition to gather seabed sonar data directly at the site of the September 2022 subsea destruction of the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline, perhaps the highest profile energy sabotage incident to date. Attribution of that blast remains a subject of heated debate, and early findings from this study call into question some of the current narratives. And 4th and finally, I visited the Brunsbüttel LNG terminal in Germany. Construction of that terminal was meant to reduce Germany's energy dependence on Russia. But in late 2023, an onshore pipeline meant to connect the terminal to the German grid was found drilled through. And just last month, just a few weeks ago, Russian military-grade intelligence drones were spotted flying over the terminal. These examples join dozens of others that have taken place in recent months, from an explosives cache with detonators found deliberately buried next to the NATO pipeline network just south of Heidelberg, Germany, to incidents in Poland, the Czech Republic, France, and the United Kingdom, where attribution has been made against Russian actors as well as non-Russian nationals that have been hired online, on social media, on Telegram by Russia's military intelligence, or the GRU. Commissioners, it is time that NATO leaders turn the table on the Putin regime in terms of its hybrid warfare campaign and move from Russia's summer of sabotage to NATO's autumn of action. To this end, I leave you with these recommendations. Number one, Congress should support the invocation of NATO Article 4 consultative mechanisms from concerned NATO member states to respond to sabotage incidents officially attributed to the Kremlin or Kremlin-backed entities. Number two, Congress must extend existing sanctions on the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline that will otherwise sunset this year and reverse the 2021 Biden administration decision to avoid sanctions on a Nord Stream 2 construction vessel, the Blue Ship, and its then owner, the quote, Stiftung Klima- und Umweltschutz MV. Number three, Congress should pass urgent legislation to end, finally, the ability of former U.S. officials from leaving office to work for U.S. adversaries like the Russian Federation ever again. And fourth, and finally, Congress must pressure the Biden administration to allow Ukrainian military to conduct necessary long-distance strikes against Russian military launch facilities who will otherwise continue to terror bomb Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Through these actions, we can both deter further Kremlin sabotage and support Ukrainian victory, and make it clear to those that would propose otherwise, there can never again be a return to business as usual with Putin's Kremlin, ever. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.